Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. Can't believe it. Here we are, another week. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know that it's a very busy time of year. Hopefully, all of you are working hard on your business planning and finishing up those end of the year projects so you can have a great start to the new year. And of course, we also hope you'll have some fun and some time with family. So we're part two of our part three, of our series of how to be a high six-figure earner. So do me a favor, if you will, and type into the chat box just quick hello. Maybe tell us, what are your big holiday plans? What are you going to do that's exciting to reward yourself for working hard in 2025? So I'll give you just a minute just to see those responses coming in. That way I know that you guys can hear me loud and clear. Thank you, Tracy. Awesome. Great to have you here. And I know that if you're in the Pacific time zone, it is lunchtime. So thank you. Hey, Peter says he's having a Boxing Day party open house for friends and neighbors. Nikki is having her first spa day at King Spa, spending time with family, holiday show. Guys, all of that is so well deserved. And you know, it's really easy. I said this to my business partner, Ben Kinney. I said, you know, Ben, you got to have a moment to enjoy because there is always another mountain to climb. And isn't that true in our business? It feels like if you dare to take a break, you're going to lose that momentum. And the good news is today, we're going to talk about some tactics for those who want to earn six figures. Maybe this is going to be your first full year in real estate in 2026, and that's a goal. Or for those of you who really want to earn in that high six figures. Some of you I know, actually, Peter, even aspire to break through to that seven-figure number, which is what I love about real estate, right? The opportunity that we have. So let's dive in. So I think all of you, as I'm looking at names here, I recognize them. So I think you all know me. Debbie DeGroat, CEO and co-founder here at Forward Coaching. My business partner, as I mentioned, Ben Kinney, and I have had the pleasure for me over the last 25 years, Ben, maybe not quite so long, of really getting to know some of the most wonderful people in our industry and able to coach the truly top 10% across the country. And some of you, we coach you, and it is an honor and a pleasure. So welcome back to, it is part two. See, I was right. Part two of being a high six-figure earner. Before we go into part two, let's do just a quick little review from our last session together. So our last session, we talked about the mindset of a six-figure plus earner. You know, as I was driving here to the office, so for some weird reason, Zig Ziglar, some of you might have heard of Zig Ziglar. Some of you, he died maybe before you were born, but he was a very famous sales trainer for many, many decades. He wrote lots of books. They're still really awesome. If you ever find one, maybe a used bookstore, you see a Zig Ziglar book, grab it. He had some awesome one-liners. And one of the things I remember hearing Zig talk about on an audio program, he said that he was doing an event and a lady came to him and said, I hate my job. And he said, well, you couldn't hate everything about your job. And she said, yes, I do. I hate my job. And he said, well, let me ask you, do you like to get a check? Do you like to get paid? She said, well, yeah. He said, okay, so then put that down in the column that you like. Do you like to have your vacation? Well, yeah. Well, put that down in the column. And he really challenged her to think about what were the things about her hard job that she actually did enjoy. Because, see, she needed to work on her mindset. I was having dinner last night with someone who is the CFO of a global company. And he is in the weeds of closing down their numbers for the year, preparing for IPO. It is super stressful, super hard. He had to step out a few times to take calls. And he came back and he said, well, it's just the job. So I think often we are so challenged in this business on so many levels that it beats us down, it wears us out. But remember, as Zig always said, attitude and energy and enthusiasm, it is the magic. And it is 90% of your success. So if you missed last week's webinar and you forgot to register, please feel free to email me, Debbie@forwardcoaching.com. We'll get you a copy because we don't want to forget how important it is to work on and maintain a great mindset to have a really awesome year ahead. But today we're actually going to really talk about the tactics of six-figure earners who treat this as a real job. And they work every day to maximize their billable time. I coach several really amazing, actually more than several, kind of a lot, of really amazing leaders of some of the biggest teams in the country. And we had a thought a few weeks back to really sit with each of the agents on their team who were, quote, full-time in the business and really examine with them how many hours were they actually engaged in the business of selling real estate. Because you see, it's easy to think we're 24/7 because kind of is on our mind 24/7. That's the curse of this business, I guess. But when they broke it down, they realized that they were lucky if 10 hours a week, on average, that wasn't everyone, but on average in all the surveys, around 10 hours a week were truly working in the business. And then inside of those 10 hours, how many were actually billable time? So if you want to increase your income without always just working more and more and more hours, then we've got to look at what are we doing with those hours that you're investing. So part of the mindset that I think we have to work on is getting a little bit away from that, well, I'm an independent contractor, and embracing it. If we said, well, you know what? Based on what I want to earn this year, if I went out into the job market and I applied for a job to earn that amount of money, what would they expect me to do? How many hours would they expect me to work? Would they expect me to be efficient in my day? And if we flip that around, if you hired someone, paid them what you're expecting to earn next year, you might have some pretty high expectations. So we got to have a great mindset. We're going to treat it as a real job. But then inside of it, we have to have a very specific game plan. And I really think the magic is in the math, right? You often will hear people say it's a, quote, numbers game. Well, that is true. If we do the right amount of activities at the right time of day in the right way, if we talk to enough people to get what we want. But how do we figure out the math? So I'm just going to take an easy number. I'm going to take 100,000. But what you guys can do each for yourself is write down your annual income goal for next year. So it might be 200, 500, 700, but write down your income goal. And then I want you to multiply that by, we want to figure out how many units do we need to close based on my average sales price and my average commission. So let's pretend that my average commission check is $10,000. Well, that tells me then I have to do 10 units to do 100,000. Now, if my average check were 5,000, then I would have to do 20 units to do 100,000. So when I take my income goal, I do think it's very important to calculate how many units. Now, I do understand we also want to track the volume. And I know that some of you might even prefer to focus on volume, but that is a little bit dangerous. And let me share with you why. Let's imagine for a moment that you had your goal of 100,000 and you knew you were going to need to do about 10 units to achieve that. And then suddenly you sold an apartment building just out of the blue. Something fell in your lap. You knew the buyer, they knew the property wanted to buy, you wrote it up, and you did 2 deals and it was 100,000. And you're like, great, I've got this apartment building pending. I can chill out. My year is golden. And then that apartment building falls out. It falls apart. And now you're starting over at some point in the year. So I don't like to focus on the volume. Focusing on the volume is dangerous, but also it can make you lazy, right? Because what if you just also, let's flip that around and say, the first quarter of your year, it took off. You had a full pipeline. You did a great job. You've already put 100 grand pending, and now you get lazy. Well, what about the rest of the year? What about the opportunity that was there for you that we're missing? So let's talk about units. And so I said, let's take an example of 24 units. And I'll tell you why I picked 24. And it depends on your math. 24 units might make you $500,000 in your market. I always feel that the magic of a good, solid real estate career begins when you are able to do a deal a month, and then you're able to get to 2 deals a month and maintain that 2 deals a month closed consistently, and then start to grow, right? Because for most of you, if you do 2 deals a month, that's a pretty decent income. Probably goes a long way to replace a job or career you might have left, gives you some stability, and it keeps you active and mentally busy enough to feel in the game. We coach a lot of luxury agents here at Forward, and when they're selling 10, 20, $30 million houses, they don't typically do 24 units. So you know what happens? In between those big sales, it feels like a slump. They get a little bit beat down because it's just not that activity rolling. And it's hard to take a luxury agent and not have them focus on the volume. If they will let go of that and focus on the units, they will do so much more. So set a goal. If you're new in the business, we got to get you to a deal a month. If you're not new in the business, but you haven't consistently hit 24 units, let's shoot to get to 2 a month. When you get to 2 a month, we can go to 3 a month. What I really love is a deal a week. And for some of you, you do a lot more than that. But for most of you, that would be pretty cool to have a deal a week. So then if I were planning to close 24 units and I said, well, half are probably buyers and half are probably sellers, well, that's easy. I need 12 buyers closed and I need 12 listings closed. Okay, however, what about fallout, right? And it was a really brutal year in 2025 across the country. higher percentage of deals falling out than ever before. Like in my career, I used to always factor about 10% for fall through. Do you know that I think of it as last year already, this year, on average, it was like 30%. But that's not normal. There's a lot going on that maybe caused that. So let's say if we said, I think 20% fall through is reasonable. So what that means, if I still want to close my 24 units, I'm going to have to actually put pending 29 units. So that might be, 14.5 is hard to do. It is the math, but maybe that looks like 14 buyers, 16 listings, or 16 buyers and 14 listings. But you see what I mean, guys? If we want to be sure to close to a month, then we've got to allow on top of that a little measure for fall through, right? Now then we need to know our numbers, our ratios. So if I wanted to pend my 14.5 buyers, how many buyer agreements do I need to sign? Now, as I talk to most of our clients who are monitoring this number very carefully in their teams, some of the very successful tell me that the number they assume is about 50% of the buyer agreements they sign will turn into a closed buyer transaction. And that may sound a little bit low. Why only half? But I think you all know it's true that sometimes a buyer will just call and they want to see one house and they sign to see that one house, but you meet them, they're not ready to commit, they're not really willing to engage, they ghost you, they don't respond to you. Sometimes that's going to happen. Sometimes you may decide this buyer is just not motivated enough. They're wasting my time, and you may fire them. So I think to be safe, if you said, I'm doing a good buyer consult, I'm working hard on this, so I know at least 50% of the buyers I sign will probably buy, then that's going to tell you how many agreements you need. Okay, so if half of your agreements will turn into a transaction, then we need 29 agreements. But then we're going to meet with some buyers who refuse to sign. Or you meet with them and realize financially they're not able. Because we always say they need to be ready, motivated, right? Willing. So they're going to cooperate, they're going to work with you, they're going to be loyal, and then able, financially able. So some of them might not fit that criteria. So if I assume that I'm going to sign 50% of who I meet with, then I need to meet with 58 buyers to do my consultation. So you see, now we can look at it backwards. If I meet with 58 buyers and do a consultation, then I'm going to sell, I went forward, not backwards. Then I'm going to sell, I'm going to sign 29 and I'm going to pend 14.5. Now, let's take it from the listing side of things. If you were going to list 15 properties, then potentially you might say, well, I'm going to double that just to be safe. I'm going to say I need 30 appointments. Now, guys, I get it that some of you have a really high listing taken ratio. You might be 80%. So do the math based on your own ratio. However, be careful, because if you have a goal to add a new lead gen source or two in the new year, so I've heard a lot of people say in the new year, I'm going to work expired listings. In the new year, I'm going to start circle dialing around my open house. So if previously you took 80% of the listings you went out on, but they were all past client and sphere, it's quite likely that your ratio is going to drop when you add new sources, right? Because they're strangers, you may be competing. So I want you to be careful to plan for enough appointments, but I don't want you to go crazy and have a ridiculous number that's not actually even really needed. So for example, if I want to list 15 and I said, well, you know what, then I'm going to go on 100 appointments. That's not really the math, right? I know that if I pre-qualify them, if I prepare well, that I need about 30 appointments and I'm going to list about 50%. So if we took all of that and said, well, how does that fit into a week? And let's say you work 48 weeks. Let's pretend you actually take a couple of weeks of vacation, right? Or maybe you're attending an educational event. So you actually work 48 weeks. So guess what? That means I need to go on 2 buyer consultation appointments per week. And I need to go on 1 listing appointment every 1.5 weeks. You see, guys, if thinking about 2 a month or whatever your number is seems daunting, it doesn't seem as daunting when you do the math. How many units, how many appointments, your conversion ratio, and therefore, what do you need to focus on 1 week at a time? You know about how they say, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. So how do we have the best year ever in 2026? We do it 1 week at a time. So for this person's goal, who wants to do 2 units a month, 2 buyer consults, because we know if they go on the 2, then they're going to get 1 of them. And we know the ratio that we'll buy, and we need 1 listing appointment every 1.5 weeks. So, okay, but what if, Debbie, 25% of my appointments no-show or cancel, which is a really good thing to think about. Now, what I've noticed is it's more likely to be your buyers who will cancel, right? Would you guys agree? Because on your sellers, oftentimes you're going to their home. So it's not as likely that they're going to not show up, right? Now, they might cancel because they changed their mind. So on the buyer appointments, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to round this up. I'm going to do my math and round it up. I'm just going to say I need 3 buyer appointments a week because that allows for a little measure of cancellation. On my listings, I was saying I needed to go 1 listing appointment every 1.5 weeks. It's really 1.2 if I'm going to allow for a little cancellation. Why don't I just make it easy? I'm going to say 3 buyer appointments a week and 1 listing appointment a week set. So that allows me to set enough that if 25% cancel, I still get to the table. So we know the number we want, then we want to add a little for fallout ratio. 20% is probably fair. And then we want to add a little, potentially 25%, for no show or cancel. Because if you don't add for those factors, your year will be short, right? Now, before we move on, just a couple of thoughts on how to eliminate some of the no-show and canceled. So number 1, best and easiest is book the appointment as soon as possible. And that may sound super basic, but I've actually tracked ratios on this, especially with the buyers. If you could get to the buyer same day or within 24 hours your opportunity of them showing up is over 90%. But each couple of days after that, the ratio drops. By the time you're a week out, it might be as low as 30-35%. So book the appointments whenever possible, as soon as you can. Then the next thing is tell them why they want to keep that appointment. The fact that you're going to provide awesome, valuable information they need to plan their real estate future, that there's no pressure, there's no obligation in this meeting. It's an opportunity to meet, to decide if the services and benefits are exciting enough for them to choose to hire you. So we want to book that appointment quick, and we also want to tell them why they should keep that appointment. Now you can add a third piece, which is asking for their commitment. You know, I can say this to a buyer or a seller. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I want you to know I'm very excited about the opportunity to meet with you. And I'm going to do so much work to prepare incredible, valuable information. I will be very efficient when we meet, and I know you're going to be glad that we got together. So can I ask you, we've booked for tomorrow at 2 p.m. for your promise that you will keep this appointment. See, I'm going to ask for their commitment. So now we got to figure out if that's what I want to accomplish, the amount of units, the amount of appointments, based on my current skill and the lead sources I focus on, how many outbound conversations per week do you need to make this happen? So you should have been doing some business planning by now. If you actually already know this number, please feel free. Type it in the chat box if you know your number. You know, if you are very experienced with incredible skills and you have a huge database and most of your business comes from past clients and Sphere, you might say, you know what, Debbie, I need to talk to 10 to get the business that I need. But if you're brand new and you're circle dialing and you're talking to strangers and you're meeting people at open house, you might say, gosh, I think I might need to talk to 100 to get to the table on an appointment. You know, and many of us for years have had the goal of 20 conversations a day, and that's not including text and email. That's eye to eye or ear to ear. 20 conversations a day times a minimum of 5 days a week, or at least 100 conversations. So if you don't know your ratios, start tracking. Start keeping a log. Many of you use great CRMs. I know lots of you use Brivity, which makes it easy, but start tracking your dials, your conversations, your appointments, and your success or lack of it. So we want to know by the end of the first quarter exactly how many conversations a week that you need to have to make your goal happen. Because if we don't know that, how do we know if we're doing enough, right? So if you said, wow, 20, that's just too much. That's overwhelming. I don't think I can do that. I haven't even been doing 20 a week. You know what? You wouldn't be alone. As I travel around the country and I get to sit in rooms with people, Judy, the CRM I mentioned, which I know many on the call are using, is Brivity. Lots of great functions, features for tracking all kinds of goodies. You can Google it, check them out. They'll give you a demo. But as I travel around and I sit in these rooms and talk to people, You know what they tell me? This is my average answer I get, that their average number of outbound conversations a week, 3. That's the answer I often get. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have people calling them sometimes, right? That could be happening. But where they are outbounding, they are pursuing, they are reaching out, they are taking the initiative, often they tell me 3. So think about it. Back to momentum. What builds momentum? A consistent activity done with a very precise process at the same time every day during your work week. So it would be wonderful to once in a while do a mass call day and dial 150 people and talk to 25. That'd be wonderful, but that won't create momentum. Momentum happens when you start with something and you stay consistent. So maybe you start with 10. And what if you take the rest of this year to build that habit, to say, I'm going to do 10 quality outbound conversations a day. And perhaps you decide, I'm going to start that at 9 o'clock in the morning, every morning. And then I create my list of who are the people that I'm going to call and I'm going to focus on. Because you see, what I don't want to do is get to my computer to do my dialing, but I don't know who I'm going to call. So now whatever time I had budgeted for that lead gen, now I'm starting to mess around and try to figure out who to call, right? So John, let's see. What are your thoughts about agents who convert efficiently when they make contact? What happens when they call 10 and have a way of converting 4 or 6 of their contacts? You know, John, in the years I've been in the business, when I see super high converters at that level, they're normally calling expired, canceled, for sale by owner. And the reason and they have really incredible skill, no doubt. But the reason I choose those 3 categories, those people are already sellers, right? They wanted to sell, they tried to sell, or they're currently trying to sell. So these are 10 sellers. And if I can talk to 10 of these and my skill is high enough, I could convert 4 to 6 of those. That would be possible. Now, in their past client and sphere, if they talk to 10, would the odds be that 4 to 6 of the 10 are going to transact in real estate? Probably not, but they might invest or they might give you a referral. So if you think of expired, canceled, for sale by owner, obviously we have to be careful, scrubbing against the do not call list so we don't break any rules. Those are hot, right? Then we go to your past client and sphere. They love you. They will tell you if they're looking to do something, and they will give you a referral. Now, does that mean the other types of prospecting are bad, like circle dialing? No, doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that the ratio is different. But you know what else, John? If I'm talking in depth to an expired, it's going to take me longer per conversation than it takes me doing my circle dialing. So while I may need to talk to more, I can do it a little faster. So guys, my routine as an agent for 16 years was this. By 8 o'clock in the morning, I was on the phone calling expireds. As soon as I finished the expireds, I went immediately to my hot leads. For example, if it's Monday morning and I met Judy and John at open house yesterday, I am calling those hot leads, trying to book an appointment immediately. Then I would roll from that into calling my designated number of past client and sphere. So I took my list and I divided it by 60 business days in a quarter, right? So if you took your list of how many past client in Sphere, divide it by 60 business days in a quarter, that will give you your number of how many past client in Sphere to talk to each day. So when I finished my expired, my hot lead calls, then I finished my Sphere calls, then I went to for sale by owner, because it didn't really matter if it was a little bit later, went to for sale by owner. If I'm done with all of that, now I go to my circle dial. So kind of look at it like a stew. I've got to do a little bit of all of the lead gen levers, but I'm going to start with the hottest and the best, if that makes sense, guys. Okay. So let's assume that in an hour of outbounding, you could talk to at least 5 people, but you want to talk to 10. So that might mean I need to budget 2 hours to prospect daily. Now, you might be faster, you might have more people answering the phone, but I think it's really safe to assume that you could probably talk to pretty close to 5 people an hour. Now, because we want to make 2026 super awesome, here's a suggestion, a tactic of a 6-figure earner. You know, I remember the first year that I wanted to earn $100,000 in the business. And it was really hard because at the time, my average sales price was like $60,000, because this is going back a few years. So it took quite a bit of units to get to that 100,000, and I had to hustle. And my broker said to me, he goes, here's a rule I want you to make for yourself. On any given day, if you do not have a buyer or seller appointment, you got to find one person to get in front of who could lead to an opportunity. And he gave me some examples. He said, that could be lunch with a friend who is a great referral partner. It could be meeting with a vendor or affiliate and talking about a mutual referral relationship. It could be popping by a past client or Sphere. It could be knocking on the door of a lead that you spoke to on the phone to introduce yourself. It could be touring a for sale by owner. It could be visiting an expired. But he said, if you do not have an appointment and you want to be this high 6-figure earner, then on any day you have 0 appointments, get in front of somebody. So I want to be sure as we go into this year that at least a portion of your schedule and your prospecting includes calling through that past client and Sphere at least quarterly. And it's kind of a mixed camp. In all my years of coaching, it's about half of the agents that prefer to talk to strangers and they neglect their past client and Sphere, and about half that are great with their past client and Sphere, but they neglect other opportunity. So if I could only pick one thing, it would be your past client and Sphere, because probably as much as 80-85% of your business will come from them. So let's make sure that you do that math and you figure out to contact them all quarterly. How many do I have to speak to? And if you need some help, you can get a quality CRM. You can take a look at Brivity to organize and manage those clients and nurtures. So you can see a little bit here from the dashboard that, and all of you, this is not a commercial for Brivity because I don't sell Brivity. You guys may have another CRM, and I'm sure it has some functionality like this, but you might not be even aware. You might not be using it. So you see how it did some recommendations for goals, And then it broke down what the activities needed to be. And then as this person is making their calls, it's going to show and track how many dials, how many conversations, how many appointments. And there's a book, The Four Disciplines of Execution, that was very popular a few years ago. And one of the lines in the book is when performance is measured, it improves. And when it is measured and reported back, it improves exponentially. So please start tracking your numbers. Now, the other thing a great CRM will help you with is your lead follow-up. I know in my first few years in the business, I know I lost a lot of deals because I was disorganized. I hate to admit it, but it's true. CRMs did not exist when I got into the business. So things on a scratch pad, things in a book. I would meet someone at lunch and they'd be a lead and I'd write their info on a paper napkin. And then 2 months later, I would find it on the floorboard of my car. So let's treat these leads like gold. When you meet someone that's a great opportunity, of course, we want to spark legitimate urgency to get them together with you as soon as possible. Then we want to take all their contact information, all the notes, everything you know about them, put them in that CRM. Save that information, and then schedule your next callback. So that even if you forget, automatically 5 days from now, oh yeah, I'm supposed to call Mary, the lady I met at the restaurant, because I told her I would call her in 5 days. And then every day, again, whatever CRM you're using, when those appointments or to-dos pop up, do them, right? Don't get behind, because 70% of your business will likely come from the leads that you have in your pipeline, possibly even already today. Like much of your business for next year, it honestly may already be in that pipeline. So get it out of there. Do your follow-up diligently. If I had to say the 3 most common things I hear when people come to us at Forward for coaching, they say, I need systems, which really means they need some technology, things like a great CRM, process for how they do things. That's a common one. I need to do a better job contacting my past clients in Sphere. That's a very common one. And the third one is I need to do a better job with my lead follow-up. And guys, it's really kind of scary if you think about it. If 85% of your business might come from your Sphere and 70% could potentially come from lead follow-up, I mean, even if you don't have a big Sphere, you could get 70% from your leads. Bottom line, if we're neglecting the things that matter most, we're leaving a lot of money on the table. So if you did badly managing those categories this year, and you're not happy with how your year went, guess what, guys? Here's the good news. Fix it. It's not brain surgery, right? It is not brain surgery. We do the math. We know what we want. We know how many people per day we need to talk to. We know how many hours that's going to take. And if we do that consistently, we will achieve the goal you have set. Here in Newport Beach, some of you live near or you're familiar with maybe Catalina Island. And I could get on this big boat in Newport Harbor, and the boat will take me to Catalina Island. And there's a compass setting that will get us there. And I feel like it was like 21 on the compass, because I have a friend that has a boat and he said something about that once. But guess what? If the compass setting is not accurate, I won't get to Catalina. In fact, I won't even see the island. I'll just keep going to who knows where, China. I don't know where I would go if I just passed right by that island. So if you set your goals, but you don't do the math underneath it to know the activities, the when, the how many, then you're going to miss the goal. So when you track your numbers, you're going to track your conversion ratios. And then that's going to tell you, do I need to call a few more? Or, hey, am I golden? I am right on track. So John, I'm looking at your comment. NAR saying 92% of agents didn't sell a unit in 2024. So it seems like selling 24 would put you in the top 5%. You're right. You're right about that putting you in the top, 5% in most markets. In fact, most brokers would be jumping through hoops to hire an agent doing consistently 24 units a year. Some markets, it might be a little easier than others. For example, in some of the more affordable price points in the country, there might be a little bit more activity, or you might find some of the agents there don't market quite as aggressively as, say, an agent in Beverly Hills or Miami or New York or Newport Beach. So definitely there are variances across the country, but you're right. That's why I said 24, 2 deals a month, that's pretty amazing. So 6-figure plus earners know it's a numbers game. It's also, though, a skill game. So we want to figure out our 5 to 6 lead gen levers. We want to have our very specific action plan to work those lead gen levers. And then as we monitor the conversion ratio, that's going to tell us where we need to improve. I think that if we would look at this like a professional athlete does, a high performer in other industries, they're always looking to beat their own personal best. If you said to me, well, 80% listing taken, that's a pretty good ratio. I'd say, you know what? You're right, it is. But here's the funny thing. Let's do the math. What if your skill was so high that you took 98.2% of the listings you went out on? And you might say, why not 100? Well, 0.8 might be a little crazy and you don't want them, okay? Price is too high, things are too weird, and you don't want them. But I think most of us would say, yeah, I'd rather take 98.2% of the listings than 80%, because that gap, there's a lot of money and profit in that gap. Then why the gap? Figure out what is stopping you from increasing that listing taken ratio or increasing the buyers you meet with converted to an agreement or converted to a sale. Because there's a lot of magic in that math. And 6-figure earners lean into their areas of strength to maximize their opportunity. If you know you're an awesome networker, then get out there and do more of it, right? If you say, nope, networking is not my baby, well, what do you love? Back to Zig, right? Well, I love investments. I love helping people build their wealth in real estate. Great. Then let's prospect some absentee owners, right? Because I get it. We got to be mindful the do not call list, all the great best practices. But you know what? There's still plenty of people you can talk to. And 6-figure plus earners, they know the power of connecting with influencers in their market and in their industry, and they nurture those relationships. So if you're going to recommend a CPA to your clients, why not find the best in your town? Why not meet that CPA and say, hey, I want to do something for you because I also want to do it for my clients. I would love to recommend you to my clients when they ask me for a great CPA. Would you be okay with that? Could we have lunch? Could I get to know you a little better? You know, one of our great clients and friends has this massive business built with the influencers in his community, but he always leads first with value. Doesn't just run in there and ask for referrals. He builds those relationships by helping them with things that would help them build and improve their business. So it's a lot. I get it, right, guys? That's why we broke it into 3 parts. So we have mindset, tactics today. Next week, we're going to talk about the schedule, you know, the ideal perfect day, managing some of the distractions and interruptions and maximizing that billable time. But to John's point, yes, build a skill which will increase efficiency. You know, if it took you 2 hours to get the appointments you need and your skill goes up because you're working on that skill, and now it takes you 1 hour to get the appointments you need, great, right? Awesome. You know, we don't need to work 60, 70, 80 hours in this business if we do it strategically. So it's not easy. None of us are born naturally disciplined, but that's why highest percentage of 6-figure plus earners have coaches and accountability partners. And that might be your spouse, significant other. It might be your broker or office manager. You may have a coach that you found at another company and you love them. Good for you. But we all need someone to see the blind spots, to nudge us. You know, it's that, I call it that creepy feeling when you know there's something you should do, but you really don't want to because it's really uncomfortable. And the coach says, you gotta go, you gotta do it. And you do it, and it's amazing. So you gotta ask yourself, as I get ready for the new year, who is coaching me? Who is going to be that accountability and support? And if you need some help, you know where to find us. And I'm happy to speak with you before Christmas. Van just popped up the link there. You can request your complimentary strategy call, and we will do a very clear breakdown, just like we went over today. Your goals, your units, your activities, your outbound, what your schedule needs to be. Because the more simple that blueprint is, think about the peace of waking up each morning and knowing I know exactly what I need to do, where I need to be each and every hour of today. And I know that recipe is going to get me to my goal. So I will help you figure it out. But thank you guys so much for being here today. Feel free to send questions to me. You always can. Debbie@forwardcoaching.com. And if you'd like a copy of this recording, it's going to go out automatically. You don't even need to request it. And I think it takes about a day to turn it around. All right, guys, have a great day. I will see you next week. Bye-bye.